Today we're going to go through the RPE scale, which stands for the rate of perceived exertion. This is a scale I use usually in the gym, not so much with people online unless they know what I'm talking about, but when I'm in the gym with clients or in a group training setting, this is something that I can seem to get a lot of value out and they seem to understand as well. I'm going to talk about it just specifically towards conditioning programming or conditioning methods rather than strength training. Now RPE is used in strength training, but I prefer to go through that on an individual basis rather than bunch everyone into one RPE. So in strength training, RPE is known also as RIR, reps in reserve. So for example, if the RPE scale goes from 0 to 10 and you perform an RPE of 7 on the chest press, that means that you left 3 reps in reserve, so that the reps in reserve number would be 3. So if I program something and said RIR 3, that would mean you are finding a weight that you could possibly push 3 more reps at. So for the reps in reserve or RPE, I don't really use that too much in the strength training setting, so that's why I'm going to just specifically talk about conditioning here. So the RPE scale for conditioning, general public specific, we're going to talk about the rate of perceived exertion when it comes to conditioning. So there are differences. The RPE scale is a spectrum moving through the ranks. So it's an estimation of how hard you are currently working. It is a self-assessment to dictate how hard you are going. So again, it's this self-assessment. There's a few good things about the RPE scale. Sometimes it's a good way to self-assess yourself and to understand the different paces. Other times it can kind of negatively impact you because maybe they're not as accurate as they should be, or people perceive things to be harder than they are, and they're giving me, let's say if the scale goes from 1 to 10, they're giving me an RPE of 9 when in reality it's probably a 6. So again, it's about understanding the body. A lot of people use the scale 6 to 20 to help correlate it to the heart rate, but I prefer a simpler model of 1 to 10 or 1 to 5. So people use the RPE scale of 6 to 20, 6 being minimal impact. So when you wake up, maybe your resting heart rate for the majority of the population, general public, is around 60. And their max heart rate could be up on 20 or up on 200 minus their age. So they're trying to correlate this 6 to 20 kind of spectrum or figure as your heart rate. So you know if your heart rate or your beats per minute are at 140 and whatever you're doing, then you are on an RPE of 14. 14 multiplied by 10 is 140 if your heart rate is around 140. So again, there is a kind of minus your age minus your age option there. So let's say if you're 20, maybe 14 is actually 140 minus 20, 120 beats per minute. Again, I'm not too mad about this method. I would prefer a simpler model of 1 to 10 or 1 to 5 even in some cases. So again, it's not 100% accurate. Obviously, it's your own assessment, but it's important to understand your own pace and learn how to differentiate between different paces and pace goals, especially in a workout where you have to hit different paces. So I use 1 to 10 or 1 to 5. If you look at the top one, it's 1 through 10. I mean, 1 is you wake up, you're at absolute rest here. The lowest your heart rate is going to be all day. 10 is max effort, fatigue. Anything past 10 is death. So 10 is as hard as you can physically push. Now, a lot of the ones I use are 5 to 6 and 7 to 8. 9 the odd time if we're doing some sub-maximal work. So 5 to 6 would be a conversational pace, but working. So someone else's 5 might be, you know, the paces, it's important for people to understand their own paces because your 6 moving at the same pace as someone else might be their 9. So that's why it's important to have these kind of reference points. So 5 and 6 should be conversational. If I talk to you, you should be able to talk back in full sentences, catch your breath, and be doing just enough that you're working, but you're able to hold a conversation. So I know if I give you the goal of an RPE of 5 or 6 and you're giving one-word answers back to me, you're more likely toward an 8, possibly pushing on a 9. 7 is a tempo. So the pace I would give people for 7 is, you know, you're able to consistently hit this pace maybe for 5 to 8 goals, depending on your rest times, of course, depending on the sets. But 7 would be something that you're able to repeat quite hard. You're just recovering in time and, you know, maybe in between bursts you can have a bit of a conversation, but while you're working, you're working. 8 is more like one-word replies. It's a big push. If I tell you to go to an RPE of 8 and I'm explaining it let's say on the assault bike or the rower or the skier, or you're running or whatever you're doing, you know, if I'm going to ask you a question, a 1-word reply is probably all you can muster. Anything more, and I know you'll be able to push the boat out just a little bit more. Then again, to dumb it down or simplify it a little bit more, I often go from 1 to 5. So 1 is wake up, 5 is max effort, and then 2 is just any bit of movement, 3 conversational, 4 1-word answers. That's kind of a very easy way to just scale it down completely and make it simpler on the client. Because then again, a lot of clients who might come into you, or a lot of groups you might work with, might not totally understand this, and it might take them a few weeks or 4 or 5 goes at this to really understand what their pace is. So they're just 2 scales that I use when I'm explaining to someone the pace I want them to get. So how to calculate accurately. So the first way you could do is use a monitor. So heart rate straps, monitors, watches, or other gadgets can give you a good indicator of where you're at, as you can equate the RPE scale to your effort level or your heart rate. So different watches, different kind of pieces of technology or kit give off different sound bites, or give off different, I suppose, levels. Some of them go maybe from 80% to 100% effort is your red zone or whatever. Some of them go in colored zones, some of them go off heart rates, some of them go off effort levels. Some of them do all 3 together. So if you have a heart rate strap on or a watch and you're doing these sprints and you're trying to regulate it yourself, and then after you check the data and you see how close you are to that, and you think, okay, well, maybe next time I could actually push a bit more further on that. I thought I was at an RPE of 8, I was actually at 6, 60% effort. It's time to push it on a little bit for the next one. So I know maybe if I was hitting 20 calories in the rower there, you know, divide it by 6, multiply it by 8, whatever way you want to do it to get your percentage, I could push a bit further realistically. So again, there's a bit of trial and error, but it is handy if you have some sort of monitor to kind of self-regulate yourself. And that's where it comes down to the important thing, is after the session, kind of looking back at your data and being able to read and interpret that and see what was actually going on. Then 2, there's different tests that can help. So do some max effort sprints or intervals. Take those times or 100%, so that's your RPE 10, and get your percentages from there. So if I say I want you to hit an RPE of 6 or 8, you get your percentage. Maybe you add that percentage onto the time or calorie score or meter score, and that's your goal for this workout. So again, it's learning to consistently hit these paces. And the best way to do that is to kind of get your 100% max effort and go from there. And then when you retest your max effort, the hope would be that you have built that capacity to beat the last max effort, or at least to be able to repeat it. So considerations. So RPE is not great for beginners, as they are learning about their body, their limitations, and going through the infamous newbie gains. So as you begin, RPE is going to change session to session, block to block, especially with weight training. Now I know this is about conditioning. You're going to feel it more in weight training, but in conditioning you will feel it. Your fitness is going to be, I suppose, jumping and improving at such a vast rate, it's quite hard to use the RPE because it's changing every week or 2. This is useful for pacing, as a lot of people follow structured programs struggle to move through the gears. People either know slow or fast, first gear or fifth gear, which is detrimental to their aerobic fitness journey. You need to learn to jump through the gears between. You need to learn to be able to repeat sprints. You need to learn your pace for repeating longer runs, shorter runs, intervals, different things like that. You can't just simply go from aerobic, out and out aerobic work, slow heart rate work, to extremely fast sprints. There has to be an in-between. They are the building blocks. And that is pretty much everything. That's all we're really going to go through on this. I did want to keep it short. I wanted to keep it simple, and I wanted to show you exactly how I kind of define it at work when I'm training clients, either be it a small group or larger group. It's important for you to be able to really bring it down to the basics, give everyone simple goals, and let them kind of figure it out from themselves from there. And of course you can advise. You can go around, talk to them while they're doing it, see how they're getting on, and then maybe, you know, say, I think you could push a bit more, maybe let's hold it back, or let's try repeat that. So again, the RPE scale is useful. It's not the be all and end all, but I find it quite useful when it comes to conditioning.